After nail and hair salons were asked to shut down for a second time, Governor Gavin Newsom is now allowing these services to operate outside. But some business owners question if this is realistic and if they'll be able to make the same kind of revenue. Well, as you can see, the San Gabriel Mission is boarded up and fenced off after catching fire. Now, police are still investigating whether or not this was an act of arson. But church leaders are saying that this is only one of many houses of worship throughout the country facing violent acts of vandalism. USNS Mercy is said to have at least 1,000 hospital beds and some 1,200 active duty medical personnel to treat patients who are free of COVID-19. Officials here are expecting more unrest in Los Angeles. We understand in addition to the 1 p.m. curfew here, the entire city of Los Angeles is expected to be on lockdown by 6 p.m. As you can see, the force of these mudslides were strong enough to bring debris along with these massive boulders all the way from the hillsides into people's homes.
We chose not to evacuate.
Now, airport officials say there are still rules here at LAX, even though it's not business as usual. If people are caught here when an airport is closed, they could receive a citation. A lot of schools all across the country are now going strictly online to avoid the spread of COVID-19. And smoke from a second wildfire in the San Francisco Bay Area actually halted traffic on a bridge. And back here in Los Angeles, before this Getty fire broke out, the Tick fire destroyed 18 structures in Santa Clarita. And officials say that these winds aren't expected to die down until later this afternoon. A 13-year-old autistic teen is fighting for his life as Salt Lake City is now working to improve its police force. According to the mother, it all started after her son desperately needed help for his mental state of mind. Testing for the coronavirus may be free. Your doctor's visit could set you back thousands if you end up having to stay in the hospital. It may be a good time to review your insurance policies in case the virus does come your way. With a smartphone app, Contact Tracing is able to keep track of those who have been infected with COVID-19 and who they've come into contact with. And while tech giants say it's anonymous, many Americans are questioning if it's constitutional or even effective. Even though the coronavirus originated in Wuhan, China, for some reason, there's a misconception that Chinatowns throughout the U.S. pose a greater threat of exposing people to the virus, even though none of the cases that we know of so far originated in any Chinatowns in the U.S. During the day, you can see a reddish tide all the way from Baja California to the South Bay in Los Angeles. But at night, these same organisms are lighting up the ocean, causing waves to have a luminescent blue light. Now, the president has canceled his trip to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum that's set to take place later this month because of the partial shutdown. But the jury is still out on whether or not he'll call for a national emergency. Officials obtained a search warrant for the shooter's phone, but investigators said today that they have not been able to retrieve any information from it thus far. The mood is very different here now compared to how it was only 48 hours ago. It's a very somber feeling, but people are coming together, laying down flowers and candles for the 3 people who died on Saturday. According to more than 10,000 studies, the number of people who can survive on 6 hours of sleep or less, showing no impairment, is a whopping 0%. To move on, so we have Paul Manafort facing some serious charges, but again, he only worked for the president for 100 days or so, and some argue that these charges have nothing to do with the president. So if I can ask you from a legal perspective, Ted, is there anything the president's counsel has to worry about here in regards to Manafort? At the local level or the national level, I think it gets tricky when you see, reporters and anchors getting into Twitter wars with other people about political opinions when they're supposed to be unbiased. I know it could be their personal account, but they still represent the station they work for. As a doctor, do you think that we have an issue of doctors over-prescribing to their patients? I mean, I know you mentioned that they were trying to treat people who have pain, and you sincerely want to help your patients, but do you think maybe not all doctors were playing fairly in that regard? And as you mentioned, recovery efforts are the #1 priority right now, and officials say after all this devastation, they just want to give residents closure. After all the shock, reality is sinking in for residents.
Like 3 o'clock in the morning, just before that we were woken up. My son ran to the house banging on our doors.
Mark Vance, who lives with his 80-year-old mother, son, daughter, and dog Teddy, says he's doing what he can with his own 2 hands.
We're digging up from all the flood damage here, so a lot of mud.
Like many Montecito residents, Vance and his family had a close call on Tuesday.
And I was here when the car was pushed up against. I was looking out this window when the car was pushed up against the house.
The mudslide moved his car right up to his front porch, and luckily, no mud entered his home. But his neighbors weren't so lucky.
Our neighbors had their windows pushed out and mud all went inside their house.
And as you can see, the force of these mudslides were strong enough to bring debris along with these massive boulders all the way from the hillsides into people's homes.
We chose not to evacuate.
And still, without running water, power, or gas, Vance says he isn't leaving his home.
So this morning, the incident management team, transitioned to a search and recovery process.
Captain Gary Pitney, also a Santa Barbara resident, says homes have been searched several times over. So now officials are focusing on debris piles in their search for the missing.
These crews that have been out here since the beginning, there's fatigue that's setting in, emotional and physical, but they want some closure for these families.
Now, the mudslides actually changed the landscape partly from the force of all the debris, and now authorities say that crews are working as fast as they can to clear the way before the next storm hits. Ed?